Alright, so this is task 4, activity 1 of understanding money, and it is looking at renting against mortgaging and what are the advantages and benefits of each of them. So let's look through this. So it says most people who buy their home have to take out a mortgage to pay for it. Okay, so you are actually able to buy, just like you would pay the full money if you bought, a t-shirt. You can actually do the same with a house if you have enough money, but for the vast majority of people that is not possible. So to pay it back, you take out what's called a mortgage, and pay it back every month. So the alternative is to rent a property, which is more flexible, but means that you don't own it. So you're just renting it to live there. Your money doesn't actually go towards any ownership of the property. You're just paying for the benefit of living there. Okay, so we're going to look at comparing the cost of renting and the cost of paying back a mortgage, and we are going to use a website, the BBC mortgage calculator, to work this out. So we'll get to that in a wee second. So let's have a look at this situation. So Eddie makes an, so we've got number 1. You don't need to write down all this information, but just read it with me. So Eddie makes an offer to buy a flat, and he works out that after he has paid his deposit, okay, so if you buy a flat, you need to pay a deposit. You don't pay for the full value, but you do have to put down a deposit. Usually that is 10% of the value of the property. And pay. So once he's paid the deposit and paid for furniture, so he's furnished it, he'll be left with a mortgage of £51,000 to pay back. Okay, so he has taken out a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. So there's a few things there. So 30 years the term of the mortgage. That means he pays it back each month for 30 years. And fixed rate means that the interest rate, which is this percentage, doesn't change. So we've looked at the difference between fixed rate and variable rates in one of the previous activities. So he takes out this fixed rate mortgage of 5.75% per year, PA, per annum. So how much will his mortgage payments cost each month? Okay, so we're going to do a few of these because you probably aren't aware right now that, because of the general economic system in the world at the moment, interest rates are at an all-time low. So actually right now you would get an even lower interest rate than that. Remember, when we are borrowing money, we want a low interest rate. When we're saving money, we want a high interest rate. So we're borrowing money here for a mortgage. That's what a mortgage is. We're borrowing the money and paying it back. So ideally you want as low a percentage there as possible for your interest. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a few calculations with some different interest rates. So write down with me that the mortgage is for £51,000. The term is 30 years. And what we're going to do is we're going to have, we've got an interest rate here of 5.75%. So interest rate 5.75%. And we're going to work out what the mortgage repayments would be for that interest rate. But I want to also do it for a lower interest rate, which it currently is, just so you see how different it is. So the monthly repayment, what would it be for this interest rate? And then we'll do it again for say 2% as well. So the same things here, but we'll say 2%. What is the monthly repayment if it was a bit lower, which is what it currently is? So what I want you guys to do is, if you can, go to Google just now and type in BBC mortgage calculator. So BBC mortgage calculator. And you won't be able to see it in this video, but you should have should come up with a website. BBC, which is a BBC page, and it's on homes, and it's just a wee calculator to work out what your monthly repayment would be given these situations. Okay, so if you can do that, go to BBC Mortgage Calculator, and you'll see it has some boxes for you to input some numbers, and then it tells you what your monthly repayment would be. Okay, so the mortgage required for us in this case is £51,000. So you put that in the first box. The repayment period is 30 years, so that's the same as the term. And the interest rate that we're starting with is 5.75. Okay, so if you put those three things in and then it gives you a wee arrow and asks you to calculate it, it will then tell you that your monthly repayment is just over £300. So £300 and 54 pence for that interest rate. Okay, for a slightly lower interest rate, let's see how big a difference it makes. So I'm going to change the interest rate to just 2%, which is more like what you could get just now because interest rates are very low, and it's made quite a massive difference actually. It's less than £200, it's £189.76. Okay, and you can have a wee play about with that. So if you change the repayment period, the term, if you make it less, so you repay it over less time, it means that the monthly payments will go up, but overall, because you're paying it over less time, you won't pay as much in the long run because of how this interest works, and that you kind of got a window into that from the last activity we did this morning. Okay, so there's two kind of examples of a mortgage repayment, and you can see how big of a difference the interest rate makes to your monthly repayments. Remember, this is over 30 years. This is a lot of months we're talking about here, over 300 months. So trying to get the best mortgage with the lowest interest rate is really important. It's really worthwhile. It makes a big difference. Okay, so now we're going to look at renting. So bit simpler. Eddie's friend Tanya is renting a flat in the same building that Eddie's buying a flat. The two flats are exactly the same. The rent that Tanya pays is £340 per month. What is the difference between the mortgage Eddie pays each month and the rent Tanya pays each month? So the rent is £340 per month. Now, if the interest rate was 5.75%, you can see that Eddie's mortgage is slightly less. If it was even less for interest rate, though, you can see it's a massive difference between the price of renting and the mortgage. So the difference, we're going to just use the first 5.75%, the £300.54. So that's going to be 340 minus 300.54. So that's a difference of £39.46 per month. So because the mortgages, the monthly repayment depends on that interest rate, it could fluctuate basically. If you don't have a fixed rate mortgage, like we've seen before in the previous task way back in the first unit, a fixed rate mortgage, your monthly repayments stay the same. A variable rate mortgage though varies with the Bank of Scotland base rate. So it means that it could actually go way down to something like this, but it could go much higher than this, and you could end up spending more money than it would be to rent. So whereas renting is generally just kept, you just agree a price with your landlord, and then that's just what you pay, for the foreseeable. They may look to increase that as the price of inflation and that sort of thing goes up, but generally your renting will always stay kind of exactly the same. Okay, so although Tanya pays more in rent, so you might think, well, okay, that's great, mortgages is less, so let's get a mortgage. Well, no, there's some things that Eddie has to pay as a homeowner that Tanya doesn't have to pay as just a tenant, as a renter. Okay, so these sort of things. So Eddie has to pay other costs, so £116 per year in buildings insurance and contents insurance. Okay, so that's an extra cost that a homeowner has to pay. 28 per month to the building factor. So that is like a company that basically takes care of the maintenance of the building. So if you live in a block of flats, you will have a building factor, and they come in and they clean the stairs. They maybe kind of tidy up the garden, and if there's any issues with the place, you basically you ask them to come and sort it. So you have to pay them a kind of monthly amount to kind of take care of the building. But Tanya doesn't have to pay that, it's included in the rent. £500 per year on average for repairs, replacements and redecoration. So that is if you own a flat, you obviously have the kind of freedom to redecorate things, but you also have the burden of repairing things, like for example, a boiler, which can be very, very expensive. It can be thousands of pounds to replace if that was to go down. Now if you rent a flat, that's not your responsibility. You don't have to pay for that. Your landlord pays for it. But if you own the flat, then it's you that has to, pay for that. So there are definitely advantages and disadvantages to each. And for young people, that, is, well, soon probably, in the next 5 years of your life, you probably will be looking to maybe move out. And this is the kind of decision that you need to kind of make. Are you wanting to rent a flat, or are you going to try and buy a property? And there's advantages and disadvantages to each. Okay, so what we're going to do now is kind of summarize everything we've just done into 2 tables for the advantages and disadvantages of home ownership, and then of renting underneath. So I want you to just make a little table like this. So just put in the middle of your jotter, you can just put home ownership, and then on the left, costs and disadvantages. Draw a line down the middle, and then on the right, benefits and advantages. So we'll start with the costs and the disadvantages of the home ownership. Now, in the previous page, we were told that there was extra cost that Eddie had to pay. So it was £116 per year in buildings and contents, £28 per month for buildings and factors, £500 per year on general kind of repairs. So this actually totals up to just under £1,000 extra a year. So let's write that in. So it's 900. What was the total of that? It's £952 extra. So 952 extra costs for home ownership. Okay, so that's for your home insurance, contents insurance, your factors fees, and your kind of just general repairs. So that is obviously a big thing to consider. So another disadvantage is there's no guarantee that you will, when you go to sell the property, if you sell the property, that you get your money back or even make a profit. So it's possible that if depending on the situation of the housing market, that Eddie wouldn't get as much for the house or the flat as what he paid for it. You'd hope that you would always make money on property, but it's not always the case. So there is a chance that Eddie can't sell the flat for as much as he bought it. And this is called negative equity. So basically, you make a loss on the property. So there is always that chance when you buy a house that you don't get as much for it. But there are some benefits and advantages to having your home. So, like we discussed, you kind of have the freedom to renovate, decorate however you please. Well, to an extent, renovate, decorate the flat. So when you rent a flat, often you can't just start painting the walls a different color. You can't just start putting up your own wallpaper, even your own pictures. A lot of flats, when you rent them, they will have a kind of limit of how many pictures like per room you can put on the wall. So obviously people want to decorate it to put their own sort of stamp on it, but when you rent, it's not always the case. And plus, if you then damage the wall, putting nails into the wall, or hanging anything up, you could then be charged for that later on. So we'll get to that in a minute. So other big advantage of buying a flat is that Eddie has this flat as an asset, which he can hopefully then make money on, sell it for a profit. Okay, that's the hope when you buy a home, that you can sell it for profit. So if Eddie has the flat as an asset, that he may be able to sell for a profit. Okay, and the other benefit to owning a flat is that your money is getting paid into owning that property, and then when you sell it, you then have that amount of money to use as a deposit for the next house. And that's what's called being on the property ladder. That's why it's much easier to kind of buy a property if you already have a property, because you can sell that house and that gives you the money to buy the next house. So that's called being on the property ladder. So it's easier to buy next house or next property. And if he wants, he could rent out a room to make some money, off of that, to make some money. So if he was living himself and he had a 2-bed flat, he could rent out the room to someone else, and you can make some money out of that. So that's another option if you, but you cannot do that if you're renting. That is against the law. Although people have done it and got away with it. Well, most of them haven't got away with it because they do get caught eventually. But some people have rented a flat and then sub-rented that to other people, and then been found out, and that's breaking the law, and then they get massive penalties, charged a lot for that, potentially jail time, I'm not sure. But yeah, you're not allowed to rent out a room if you are renting yourself. But if you own the property, you can do whatever you want with that. So right, let's look at renting your home. So costs and disadvantages. Big disadvantage is that your money isn't really going towards anything. You don't get anything out of your money. Okay, you don't own anything at the end of the day. So your money isn't. You don't get anything back for the money that you paid rent. Basically, let's say that you don't get anything out of the money you pay in rent. Okay, so the money whatever it is, £340 a month, you're just paying for the privilege of kind of calling that your home. You don't get anything when you finish renting there. That's it. You don't they don't give you part of that property, or you don't get any of that money back. That money's just gone to your landlord. So that is a disadvantage of renting. Yeah. When you rent, you have to often pay a large deposit when you move in for damages. So, particularly student flats, young people that move into flats, they would get charged, a large deposit, sometimes 2-3 months worth of rent or a month's worth of rent as a deposit. Which basically means if you were to then damage anything within that, you wouldn't get that money back because they would take the money out of that to pay. So in student flats, landlords are pretty infamous for not giving their deposits back to students, even if they haven't actually really damaged anything. So that is something you need to be careful of, and always make sure that you don't damage anything. So pay a large deposit for damages. Yeah, so there's also kind of rules set by landlord. So, the landlord may say no pets allowed, no pets, no smoking, no parties. We spoke about you cannot, no kind of decorating of the flat, yourself. So, you have to kind of follow those rules, because you're essentially just you're sort of a guest in someone else's property. So there is kind of rules. Obviously, if you buy the flat, you can do whatever you want in it, but not if you're renting. But there are many benefits to renting as well. So, excuse me. So, including the extra costs for home ownership. So that was including like the factors fees, the insurance, the kind of repairs. So including the extra cost for home ownerships, then renting costs less. Do not have to pay for any repairs. So do not have to pay for any within reason. If you break, if you have a party and you break a radiator, that will probably come out your deposit. But if the boiler was to suddenly break or something like that, you don't have to pay for that. So you don't have to pay for any kind of big repairs. That's the landlord's responsibility. It's of course unless you deliberately trash it. And yeah, I mean it's flexible, so it's much more flexible. So now it's recently been made law that leases, which used to be a year for a lease or 6 months for a lease or sometimes 2 years for a lease, that means you're kind of tied into renting for that length of time. Well, now all renting is just a 1 month lease. So it's much more flexible. So you only actually need to give 1 month's notice if you want to leave. So only need to give 1 month notice to leave. Okay, and then you can, if you decide you don't want to live there anymore, then you can just get up and leave and give a month's notice, and then that's it. Whereas if you have bought a kind of flat and taken out a mortgage for 20 years, 30 years, you're kind of tied into that property. Okay, so that's really the main advantages of renting and buying. Some people never own a house or a flat. So some people rent their whole life. Some people want to own a house as a kind of statement, or as a kind of tag, I suppose, for them. Just I want to be a homeowner, that sort of thing. But there's definitely benefits and disadvantages to both systems. But I hope that's given you a bit more information, a bit more kind of awareness of some of the things that you do have to deal with if you buy a house, and some of the things if you rent. So hopefully we'll help you when it comes to you making a decision later in life.